Well, hello and welcome to In the Growth Space. I'm David McGlennon. I'm your host, and I'm really glad that you've joined me here today on the podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. I'm so glad to have you along. We are talking about wellness and well-being today on the podcast. Typically, we are talking about leadership growth, personal growth and development, high-performing teams, culture, things that will help us as leaders to grow and develop and be everything that we have been called to be and been created to be. And today's topic is one that I know you are going to really enjoy. My guest today is Megan Wollerton, and this is Megan's second time on the podcast. And she has a book that just came out that we'll talk about today. And it's on a topic that I know a lot of leaders struggle with and a lot of leaders grapple with. And that really is the idea of burnout and the experience of burnout. She experienced it herself. She's going to talk about her experience because she experienced burnout working in the oil and gas industry. And then she decided to pursue her own well-being and really put her health, her wellness, and her well-being at the forefront of her life. And Megan's found a passion for learning and teaching wellness. She has studied various topics on exercise, nutrition, mental resiliency, behavior change, and creating engaging corporate wellness programs. And this led her to create her own company called Life Force Wellness, which is a corporate wellness organization that focuses on 7 distinct well-being areas. And we're going to talk about those in the podcast because she covers them in her book. And Megan has a degree in business administration with a concentration in marketing and a minor in psychology. She holds certifications as a personal trainer, a health coach, a nutrition coach, corporate wellness specialist, and positive psychology practitioner. And she also holds the title of Golden Glove Champion for amateur boxing. And now she's also a #1 Amazon best-selling author from the book, From Burdened to Balanced, Finding Renewal Through Scripture and Science. And whether you have a faith background or not, this conversation is going to be incredibly empowering. The things that Megan shares today are going to be super practical, and I definitely want you to go out and get the book. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Megan Wollerton right now. Well, hey, Megan, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. This is your second time on the podcast. I'm excited. Great to have you here today.
Oh, yeah. I'm thrilled to be here. I know last time it was about 2, 3 years ago, and we had to worry about my son breaking into the room and pretending to be a dinosaur. So,
Right.
yeah,
Oh, that's awesome. And he's at school now, so no worries.
exactly. I've got more time to do these kinds of things now.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I wanted to be able to have you on and talk about your new book. Congratulations, by the way. Amazon best-selling author. Fantastic. Congratulations. So the book title is From Burden to Balanced, Finding Renewal Through Scripture and Science. And I love the title. Talk a little bit about what led you to write the book and really maybe what was the catalyst. I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, I've had it kind of in the background to write a book about kind of my coaching style. So for a long time, I've had Life Force Wellness and I do life balance coaching, focusing on these 7 areas of well-being.
Mm,
And I really wanted to put a book out there. But I will be honest in that I had a lot of people in kind of my business advisory circle who said, like, just put it out, do it just for business. I wanted to blend some of my own personal Christian beliefs into it.
sure.
And I was told, don't do that. We were in kind of a tumultuous political climate at the
Sure.
time. And there were some reservations
Mm,
about, being a Christian author.
sure.
And then about 2 years ago or a year ago, I went on a retreat and we were studying out John 15, I am the vine, you are the branches. And
Hmm.
what really stuck out to me was apart from me, you can do nothing. And I realized I'm not making any progress on this book. I've had it on my mind for 2, 3 years. I have maybe 3 sentences written. And I think part of it was because I was really leaving God out of it. And
Sure.
so when I made that decision of, you know what, I'm just going to write the book in the
Mm,
way that I feel is best. I want to show people that there is this blending of scripture and science, that a lot of the things we're learning in positive psychology and how to take care of our bodies,
hmm.
you can turn to scripture and find the exact same stuff.
Yeah.
And so at the core, the book is really just showing how, if we would kind of follow the word
Hmm.
and do as we're kind of told in there, how much healthier and happier we would be. That a lot of these things we talk about now, like gratitude and,
Mm,
moving our bodies and eating healthy, like they're all there in
yeah.
scripture. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of pull that out and share those 7 areas of well-being in a
Hmm.
way that spoke to everybody,
Yeah.
whether you're a Christian or not. There's a lot of science and data in the book. There's a lot
Mm,
of great actionable items. But yeah, it's really a blending of my personal beliefs along with the science that I've learned as a certified positive psychology practitioner, as a health coach, a personal trainer, a nutrition coach. That's
hmm.
all packed in there. And it's presented in a way that, if you wanted to read the book and put those things into practice yourself, then you absolutely can. It could work as a
Hmm.
great study. But if you want to take a deeper dive, there's a lot of resources. We have a downloadable workbook, so
Oh,
you can
cool.
actually like map out your goals and go through some of the exercises with the workbook, or you can take it a step further and reach out to us and hire a coach that can come
Okay.
alongside you and implement some of those strategies.
Oh, that's awesome, Megan. Well, I'd love to hear, because I know that you have a story about your own journey, about your own kind of burnout, and talk a little bit about what you learned in that process. Because I know that there are a number of leaders who are struggling with this. I mean, I just know I talk to senior leaders and emerging leaders all the time. And it's a constant struggle with trying to keep up in this fast-paced world. And I know that it can be done, but we have to be very intentional with it. So maybe talk a little bit about your story and your journey through burnout and getting on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did not always start in health and wellness. A lot of people look at the credentials I've had, and it's just been like I get really obsessive, I think, sometimes, and I always want to dig deeper and learn more. I love learning about this stuff.
Yeah.
But I actually worked for 5 or 6 years in the oil and gas field industry. So right out of
Mm,
college, I got swept up in the Marcellus Shale kind of boom that we had here in Western PA.
mm-hmm.
And that was a little bit like the Wild West, and everything was new and exciting, and everything was growing. And so you really had to be on. And I was told very early on in my career by a drill site manager that his drill rig runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if I wanted to be successful in my career, I had to be on call 24/7.
Wow.
And really, I was for a long time. I was getting phone calls 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes they were for like things that could have totally waited until 8 a.m.
Yeah, right.
But they were an emergency to them, and they're in the middle of their shift. And so you can only run at that pace for so long. And I
Right.
wasn't alone. I mean, my coworkers were in that same burnout. And
Mm,
so I just started to set some boundaries. I got
mm-hmm.
into, funny enough, competitive boxing at the time. And so I was
That's great.
carving out time for me to train for boxing and setting some of those healthier boundaries. And then I started to delegate out of some of the things that I was doing and started studying from people like Brendan Perchard on high performance habits, the
Yeah.
James Clear Atomic Habits, books like Eat That Frog. I'm reading all these things on time management and delegation and learning. And I just got so into it. And eventually I got to a point in my career where I had to leave, and I was kind of forced out, and I had this non-compete for a year. And when I finally sat at home on my non-compete, I realized how burned out I was, like how
Mm,
out of shape I was.
mm,
My relationships were strained. I
mm.
basically lost all my friends outside of my coworkers. I realized
Sure.
most of my life was around my career and building
Mm,
my career. I'm a
mm-hmm.
young 20 something. I'm trying to climb the corporate ladder. I want to go above and beyond. I put in that effort. And so when I had that non-compete, I decided this is my time. I was financially okay. So I decided to really focus on myself. I started working with coaches. I started
Mm-hmm.
studying. That's when I got my personal training certification.
Mm.
And I had a coach come to me, and he basically asked me, how are you going to keep up all these new healthy habits and this new lifestyle
Mm.
when you decide to go back into oil and gas when this non-compete expires?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, you know what? I'm not going back. I love this too much. I
Wow.
see the need for this. So I got into personal training. I was working at a high-end fitness facility where a lot of executives worked out, a lot of like the Steelers and their wives and Penguins players. And so this was an elite club, and I was training there. And I would have executive after executive go, man, I wish I could bring you into work with my employees.
Oh, wow.
And so after enough time, I said, well, why not? Because I understand both worlds. I was there trying to climb that corporate ladder. I was a manager managing a team that was facing burnout. And
Yeah.
now I have all this wellness knowledge. And so that sparked the growth of Life Force Wellness and my Life Force method. And it's a whole program we have to finding that life balance for really busy working professionals,
Mm.
and started implementing that into companies. And it's one of those
Cool.
things that people really liked it. And I wanted to get that message to more people. And that's
Mm.
when the conversations around, well, you should write a book. And then
Yeah.
people can have that resource in their hand. So
Love it.
that's really been my journey. And it's just been more learning in the health and wellness side. So now I'm certified in a multiple of things, like I said, in positive psychology. So we cover some of the mental things, nutrition and personal training. So the
Mm.
physical side, stress management, sleep and recovery. So I really take a holistic approach to any program that I put together, whether it's for
Yeah.
an individual or for a corporate client.
I love that, Megan, and I love the fact that it's a holistic approach, because you take mind, body, and spirit and kind of blend all of those together, and to be able to, because we are integrated human beings. We're not just a body. We're not just a mind. We're not just a spirit. We're all of those, all simultaneous. And so I love that that's the approach that you've taken. And I love too that in the book you do share that journey, and really the fact that you went through it, and what you learned from it is so important. And I think that one of the things that I wanted to have you talk about is just really those 7 areas of well-being, because I don't think we think about these areas like all the time. And it's just really nice to be able to kind of think about what these areas are and how do they all work together.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is purpose. A lot of people also call it their existential well-being.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people hear existential, they immediately think spirituality and working in
Mm,
big corporations. You're going to have the agnostics. And
sure.
so we call it our purpose. And
Yeah.
I really describe it as, what's your reason for getting out of bed in the morning?
Yeah. Okay.
What's driving you? Like,
Mm,
why go to work? Like, what is it all for at the end of the day? And
right.
that's really where we get into some of the goal setting and where do we want to be and defining success, which is really important. But you have to have purpose. I mean, there's tons of studies out there about even people who retire and they lose their sense of purpose, and you
Yep.
see their health start to deteriorate. So
Yeah.
having that sense of purpose is really important. And I think
Mm,
it's driving a lot of companies, because we're also seeing that younger generation, the millennials and the Gen Z, they want to know that their work matters. They're not
yeah.
just there to collect a paycheck. They really want to make a difference. And
Yeah.
their career also helps kind of integrate with their life's purpose.
Yeah.
And so that's really important. So that's always like the first thing we kind of review and touch on.
Mm-hmm.
Next is mental wellness.
Mm,
So when I say mental wellness, most people think depression, anxiety, and that's not what we're talking about when I say mental wellness. I'm
okay.
talking cognitive functioning.
Ah,
How well can you remember things? How well
okay.
can you learn new skills and pick up
Mm,
new tasks? How well can you concentrate before getting distracted by all the notifications,
yeah.
which is vital to having a higher productivity and being
Mm,
able to set boundaries and get your tasks accomplished in a day.
yeah.
From there, we move into emotional wellness. So, what is kind of your emotional intelligence? Do you know what those triggers are that set you off? Are you able to keep that balance? Are you comfortable feeling the full spectrum
Mm,
of emotions? This whole book is also about not feeling guilt. I go
mm,
into how we're supposed to be sad and angry sometimes, and we're also supposed
yeah.
to be like on top of the world and manic and bouncing. The problem comes when we get stuck in any of those extremes.
Oh, sure.
So just being mindful that it's okay to feel these ways. Don't feel guilty when you're upset or down. We're all going to have a cranky day. That's fine. It's accepting that emotion and not being stuck there and letting it kind of drive you.
Yeah.
The next one is the physical well-being. So that one's kind of a no-brainer. Just how well
Right.
do you physically function? Are you disease and illness free? Are you a healthy weight? Are you moving your body? Are you sleeping well enough? Are you eating well enough? And so
Mm-hmm.
just looking at those practical examples, and I just really touch on those three: eat, movement, and sleep
Yeah.
in the book. And I give some easy tips to help kind of shift you into the right path for
Mm-hmm.
healthy living. Next is environmental, and a lot of people miss this one. But our environment really dictates a lot of our emotion and health. So I even discuss a little bit about forest bathing, which is
Mm.
kind of a trending thing from Japan, which to me, like I grew up on 10 acres of wooded area and I
Yeah.
spent a ton of time like hiking and running into
Yeah.
bears and, being in nature. I love going and hiking and trails. And so it
Yeah.
was kind of crazy to me that like there's a therapy of forest bathing. Like people were
Hmm.
being told, like, go out, take your socks and shoes off and ground yourself.
Yeah.
You come
Right.
to my house and my family's running around completely barefoot
I
all the
love
time.
it.
So it was this foreign concept, but there are a lot of people that aren't getting out into nature or
Mm-hmm.
they're living in areas where maybe they don't feel safe.
Mm.
So one of the things I bring up to my corporate clients is, hey, for your folks in suburbia who have nice sidewalks and can walk around their neighborhood and do your step challenge, that's great. But what about the people that might live in more dangerous neighborhoods where it's
Mm.
not as safe to go out and walk around in
Mm-hmm.
the evening?
Yeah.
We need to take that in consideration. So, really, how your
Hmm.
environment shapes your well being. Do you feel calm? Do you feel
Mm.
relieved? Are you in nature enough because we're called to be there and it's beneficial to our overall well being?
Yeah.
Next is our relational. So
Mm.
having that strong group of people. I go into a little bit of the triune brain model, which is being phased out, but it was an evolutionary theory about how our brain developed to form tribes and communities. And there's still a lot of data to back that up, that we are
Mm-hmm.
wired to be part of a community, that
Yeah.
when we're not part of a community, we can experience social pain. And so having good relationships, people you can call on, having mentors, having coaches, having that best friend is really important to your overall health well-being, especially when it comes to depression and anxiety. Who are those people you can call on when you're feeling that hardship?
Yeah.
And then lastly is financial wellness. And that's one
Mm.
that not a lot of people put in. So a lot of times when you look at health coaching certifications,
Yeah.
there's not a financial one. But what I found is as I was working with clients and we were diving into what's stressing you out, what's causing you the most anxiety right now, it really came around finances. They're living
Yeah.
paycheck to paycheck. If
Mm-hmm.
they had an emergency, they don't have cash on hand to deal with it. They're racking up their debt.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're trying to pay off student loans. They're trying to buy their first house. And really, God bless anyone that's trying to buy a home right now
Yeah.
in
Right.
2024, 2025,
Yep.
because it's tough.
It is.
And so those kinds of things were causing that anxiety. So we also partner with certified financial planners. We have
Oh,
a
cool.
great referral network that can help them based on what their goals are financially and help them to relieve some of that financial stress that they might be feeling.
Mm. That's so great. I love hearing all of those, and the things I don't think I would have thought about is the purpose. First of all, purpose, and then environmental. Those are two areas that I don't think I would have ordinarily thought about because well, number one, I don't think that a lot of people have thought about their purpose and having a purpose and what gets them out of bed. And you mentioned something when you were describing that about retirees, and I just read a book called Unretired, and it really kind of speaks to that same idea that when someone retires and then they don't have their friends community, they don't have their purpose, they don't have a reason to get up, that they can quite frankly they can die, and they can just really deteriorate really quickly. And there's a growing body of evidence that shows that when people can, if they do retire, but they maybe change their focus and still have a purpose, it allows them to then just focus their energy on something different. It's just not in their normal, making a living environment. And I think that that's something that we all have to kind of take a look at. But even on the other end of the spectrum, if you're a young leader like you were, like we have to be able to figure out like what's our purpose, and then how are we going to align ourselves with a company that that helps us to fulfill our purpose. And I think that's where a lot of the Gen Zs are coming into the workforce, saying that we have a purpose, and we want to be able to align with a company that has a mission that we believe in. And I, quite frankly, if you're a leader, a senior leader of a company, and you're having issues with turnover, you need to start looking at that. I think that that's an area that we need to work on together, and moving into this new area of business, because we're not in the industrial age anymore. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for sharing those. And I love, and I think that too, in your book, you go through each of these areas, and you also then give some practical tips and steps for each of these. And I might add too, it's not just for women, right? Because sometimes I think that we think that like mental wellness or emotional wellness is a woman's issue, or at least from a guy's perspective, sometimes that's a perception. Not true, not the case. So talk a little bit about that, Megan.
Yeah, I feel like anytime we talk about self-care, and one of the things I was even thinking about titling this book, and I have a workshop that goes with the book, is scriptural self-care.
Yeah.
And I feel like as soon as you throw out self-care, people immediately go to like more soft, feminine things. They think bubble baths and
Right.
skincare routines. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not really self-care.
Yeah.
Self-care is a lot of things. And so yeah, there's a chapter for each of those seven areas of well-being. So it's not a long read. It's
Yeah.
something you could probably bang out in a weekend, or if
Yeah.
you wanted to take it slow and read one chapter, put those things into practice, and then go on to the next one the next week, you can certainly do it that way. But yeah, there's a whole chapter dedicated to, let's say, like relational self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really talks about the importance of having those relationships, and it gives kind of the science and the data. And, we get into things like from Gottman on relationships, but then
Mm-hmm.
we also look at scripturally. Okay,
Yeah.
where do relationships show up in scripture? Why
Right.
do we as Christians believe that relationships should be important? And
Mm-hmm.
then at the end, I give a couple of self-care practices. And it might be
Okay.
something like write a letter. Like, when's the last time you put pen to paper and actually like wrote
Yeah.
a letter to a friend? And I think of like my kids, they get so excited anytime they get a piece of mail in the mailbox.
Yeah.
And I think for as adults, it's nice to get something in the mail that's not a bill.
Right.
So like write a letter to a friend, pick up the phone and call and reconnect to somebody. Plan a weekend, a guy's getaway or a girl's getaway weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that you can put into practice that are considered self-care for that area of well-being. And so,
Yeah.
yes, there are practices like that at the end of every chapter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to your point, I feel like anytime I talk about burnout, because really that's at the crux of what I'm trying to fix, is I don't want people to experience the burnout I felt when I worked in the oil and gas.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of kind of misleading information and studies that have come out saying that, oh, women experience more burnout than men.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, this isn't true. Women tend to experience more emotional burnout. And so I think we see it more.
Okay.
Whereas the research has shown that when men experience burnout, they tend to go numb. They know
Mm.
do what's known as disassociation. So they kind of
Okay.
disassociate from their feelings. And the scary thing here is that when disassociation is kind of compounded with depression,
Uh-huh.
it can really lead to a higher risk of suicidal ideation. And we
Uh,
are seeing that men are dying by suicide at 4 times the rate of women. So
mm.
I don't think that burnout is strictly a woman's issue. I think it really is affecting a lot of men too. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a stigma about men sitting around and talking about self-care, right?
Yeah. Right.
Like it
Right.
seems like, just to say it now, it seems like a little bit weird to sit around with your buddies,
Yeah.
grab a beer and let's talk about how we're practicing self-care.
Self-care. Yeah.
It just
Right.
doesn't happen in that realm.
Yeah.
Um, but coming from a blue collar kind of background, working in oil and gas, I work a lot with construction manufacturing, and I've got a soft spot for like those blue collar boys. I
Absolutely.
really do,
Yeah.
because I think that especially in those more masculine kind of industries,
Mm.
talking about your mental well-being, talking about your emotional wellness,
Mm-hmm.
there's still a stigma around it.
Sure.
And they're not opening up. They don't have a place to go. And so I wanted this book to be really kind of gender neutral, that it is made for men and women. There are
Mm-hmm.
examples, whether you're a working professional, whether, you are a stay-at-home mom, you can relate to the different stories in there, but the practices are really practical. They're science-based
Mm-hmm.
so that you can really overcome that. But yeah, I really wanted like didn't want to make the cover of the book like flu like with
Pink and
flowers
yeah,
and stuff.
right.
Like
Yeah.
I wanted it to be something gender
Yeah.
neutral so that men and women were comfortable to pick it up and read it and put
Yeah.
some of those things into practice.
Well, and I'm glad that you did because I think it is so important. When you're talking about, men talking about, cracking a beer and talking about our feelings, it's funny that, as the thing that I like flash back to is I have a group of friends and we would take what we called free dog trips. We would just go and, have, either mountain biking or hiking or, stuff like that. And we'd sit around a campfire. We wouldn't necessarily talk about our feelings, but in the same sense, just by being in community with these guys helped us to feel connected. And in a lot of ways, it was self-care because it was our way of getting away and just taking some time for us to be both physical and yes, a little bit emotional as well. But we wouldn't necessarily call it that. So as I speak to the men who are listening, you may not necessarily sit around a campfire and talk about your feelings. And yet, by sitting around the campfire and having that community of guys, even if you're just talking about, whatever, the Steelers or sports or what have you, you're going to experience that. And it's one way that you can create an emotional wellness, self-care routine is be able to get away with some guys and just be able to take some time with other people that will help, fill that communal cup. Because there is I mean, I know you know this, but it was the Surgeon General, I think, that called loneliness the newest epidemic, and he's got a big paper on the idea of loneliness. And so we're such a electronically connected people, but yet we're also disconnected physically. And so I think that's really important. I just think this is such a great reminder for that.
Yeah. And I'll say it's powerful if you are a man watching this and you're experiencing something. I was doing a presentation for a construction company. We were doing one of my workshops, It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And I
Yeah.
try to drive them that, like, hey, if you're experiencing any of these things, you should really reach out to your EAP. And it was really powerful. I was doing it up in Michigan and this group of probably about 100 guys. And one guy stood up and he said, guys, I called the EAP because I was struggling and I used it not just for me, but my
Awesome.
16-year-old son.
Yeah.
And they've really helped us. And we've been, seeing a therapist. And as soon as he kind of stood up and said, I used it, the whole room like softened. More
Yeah.
people started to open up and talk. I do a lot of work with some EMS. I spoke at an EMS convention,
Yeah.
and they pull up on some really tough stuff.
Right.
Not
Right.
everyone makes it to the hospital, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
And for a long time in that culture, it was not okay to talk about your mental health because you would be feared of being pulled, and then your
Mm.
hours drop, and this is how you feed your family. And they
Yeah.
had some really great speakers that really just said that they were the ones that would set the example. They'd go up and be like, hey, yesterday's call was really tough. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. How are you doing? Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I even have a talk. I'm fine.
I'm
Everything's
fine.
fine.
Yeah.
That
Right. Everything's
toxic
fine.
positivity that we do.
Yeah.
And he said all he would do is go to them and say, well, you know what? I'm not sleeping well. I'm
Yeah.
not fine. And
Mm.
then he said, usually my response that I would get back was, yeah, I'm not sleeping either. And he would just say,
Wow.
hey, can we call somebody to come in and talk to our unit? Because
Yeah.
I need it.
Yeah.
And so by him stepping out and being brave enough to say, hey, I'm not doing okay. Will you
Mm-hmm.
join me? Because I'm struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of softened it that then they would all be more willing to sit down, have a counselor come in,
Yeah.
work through whatever the trauma was.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have that one person
Yeah.
that's willing to step up and say, you know what, I'm not okay. And that
Mm-hmm.
was one of the biggest things I learned, even in the oil and gas industry, is when I, as the leader, would come into what we called our war room, and I would
Mm.
turn to my team and be like, guys, I've been on the phone since 3 a.m. dealing with this issue. I'm exhausted.
Exhausted.
If
Yeah.
you say something to me, it's probably going to go in one ear and out the other. emails only today. I'll be in my office trying my best.
Right.
And they would know, like, okay, this is not the day to ask Megan for a raise. This
Right.
isn't the day to put in that request off or put in for my vacation.
Right.
They'd send everything to me in email. But when
Mm,
I would start to do that, then my team would start to do that. So my
yeah.
team would start to come to me and be like, hey, Megan, I'm having a rough day. And
Yeah.
they'd be like, okay, let's pull so and so in and share your workload with them today. And if they're having a
Hmm.
bad day, you would share theirs. And we really supported each other. But it took that open communication and ending that
Yeah.
toxic positivity and just saying, I'm fine to every time you're asked, how are you doing,
Hmm.
to really make that. And so that's really a key
Yeah.
point in this book, too. And one of the things I talk about is like the four balance blockers, and it's the
Hmm.
mindset, because really,
Mm.
when it comes to life balance, it's not a specific time, it's not certain tasks. It's really about you mentally and how you feel about what you're doing and where
Mm.
you're putting your effort.
Yeah. I don't want to go past something that I just, as you were sharing, just about the people who, the leaders really who would step in and say, hey, I'm not okay. Can we have somebody, come in and help us with processing this? I think for the leaders who are listening, I think this is something that we have to pay attention to. And as a leader, we have to be willing to say, hey, this is not a good day for me. Whatever is going on in your, personal life, maybe, or, hey, I didn't sleep well last night. We have to be able to say, I am not okay today. And not only that, but as a leader, we have to be connected with the people that we lead so that we can pay attention to, the emotional well-being of our people, and recognize, hey, it looks like Megan may not be doing so well today. I'm going to stop by and just, check in with her. Hey, Megan, how you doing today? What's going on for you? Being able to be, curious, but also open yourself to be able to share as a leader, that's one of the best ways to create trust, but also create connection as well. Because I know that if a leader that I'm following comes in and says, hey, I'm struggling today, I'm going to be connected on a human level with them that I think is different than if somebody just says, yeah, I'm fine, and just kind of bucks it up. And I think that in today's world that we live in, it's such a fast paced, things are changing faster than we can keep up. And we have to be able to be willing to help each other and be able to help each other, really, I think, cope with with that change.
Hmm. Absolutely.
You talked a
And
little bit
and
about,
that
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it really does start with the leadership.
Absolutely. Well, and you talked about the balance blockers. Maybe talk a little bit about what blocks us from being balanced and really having that sense of equanimity.
Yeah, so working with clients, there was four main themes that kept coming up, and what was really keeping them from achieving their goals, or keeping them from feeling that balance, and keeping them in a place of burnout.
Mm,
And so the first one I put as, it's an incongruence,
mm.
meaning their beliefs don't match their actions. So
Oh,
a
yeah.
prime example of this might be somebody who says, "Oh, I wish I had more time to spend with my friends." But then when their friends call them and say, "Hey, we're going out tonight, you should come with us," they go, "Nah, I'm going to stay home and watch Netflix."
Mm, yeah.
There's incongruence there. You keep saying, and you tell me your belief is that you want to spend more time with your friends, but any opportunity you get, you dismiss. So what's going on there? There's a
Yeah.
disconnection. And sometimes maybe it's not the right friend group. Maybe there's an air of imposter syndrome there.
Mm,
Maybe
mm-hmm.
there's an air, a lack of confidence or self-esteem.
Yeah.
So we got to dig in and figure out what's keeping that. What do you really believe? Maybe, you're being told you should spend more time with your friends. That's not really a belief you hold. You're just saying it because that's what other people are putting pressure on you to say. So you
Mm,
kind of adopted this belief that's not really your own. And
right.
so first is incongruence, when your beliefs don't match your actions.
Okay.
The second is an external stigma. So
Mm,
this is, I have to do X because so and so expects me to do it.
uh,
I have to take on this big project because my boss expects me to do it. I
mm-hmm.
have to have kids because it's what my mom expects of me.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
I have to do certain things in my life because it's what somebody else expects of me. And it's not anything
Yeah.
that I internally value. It's not anything that I'm really on fire for, but it's something that's been put on me by somebody
Mm,
else. And
okay.
so this is where we get into talking about setting those healthy boundaries, learning
Yeah.
how to say no to certain things. Absolutely, we're all going to have times in our lives we're going to have to do something we don't necessarily want to do,
Right.
but this can be a really a gateway into people pleasing when it becomes that we say yes to everything and we're constantly people pleasing and we're
Yeah.
putting ourselves out for everyone else and we're ignoring our own selves,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a source of burnout.
Yeah.
The third is the internal stigma. So
Mm.
this is I have to do X because if I don't achieve it, I personally will feel like a failure. So my
Oh,
favorite
yeah.
example for this is nobody will care if you go to the store and buy Chips Ahoy and bring them to the bake sale or whatever event you have, but you personally will feel like a failure if you don't home make them at home with all organic
Mix
ingredients,
them up. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
or the I'm a bad parent because I went through the drive-through and didn't home cook. Like nobody expects you to be able to home cook every meal and everything be all organic,
Yep.
whole ingredients, but you've put this impossible standard on yourself. And so sometimes it's just reviewing like what can you actually achieve? And I see this a
Mm-hmm.
lot with weight loss clients, with clients that are working in towards a professional career, where they
Oh, yeah.
really set these really high ambitious goals, and
Yeah.
not to say that they can't be achieved, but maybe they can't be achieved in the time frame that you're putting on yourself, and they're
Yeah.
putting too much pressure, and they're not taking that R and the smart goals and really thinking what's realistic. You know, based
Mm.
on everything else you have going in your life, what can you realistically achieve that's not going to send you into burnout? We don't want you to get into that grind mentality
Right.
trying to hit these impossible goals and standards.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is ambiguity.
Hmm.
And I think every coach is familiar with this one. This is the I want to lose weight, I want to be successful, I want to be wealthy. Well,
Yeah.
okay, define success.
Right.
You know, define how many dollars do you need in the bank to until you consider yourself wealthy? Like, what's
Right.
the dollar amount? It's not being specific. And really, the analogy to this is picture running a marathon and there's not a finish line. You're
Yeah.
just running, running, running,
Keep
running.
going.
And to
Yeah.
what end?
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to just collapse from exhaustion. You have to set a finish line. You have to set a
Mm.
marker in the
That's so
ground.
good.
And with that, you have to celebrate when you hit those milestones. We
Mm-hmm.
do not spend enough time celebrating our successes. It is okay to achieve a goal, go, yes, I did that, spend a little time in celebration, and then set the next goal. I'm not saying don't go for big goals, but they
Yeah.
have to be cut down. You have to experience wins. You should celebrate those wins, but you have to have a line in the sand. Otherwise, you're just going to fall over from exhaustion.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt about it. Megan, these are such great tips and things to be aware of for all of the leaders that are listening. I think that this book is so practical, and again, as we talked about earlier, it's not just for women; it's for men and women. All of these things apply to any human being because in today's work world, we grapple with these things. We grapple with all of these areas of our health, our purpose, our mental wellness, our emotional wellness, the physical wellness, environmental, relational, and financial wellness. And so when we think about each of these, it's just all part of us. And so how do we address them? And I know that you give some practical tips as we've already shared, but there's more in the book. And so how do people get a copy of that? What's the best place to go to grab a copy of your book?
Yeah, so it is on Amazon, but if you want, you can just go to burdenedtobalancedbook.com and there's links that take you right into the Amazon store. And
Okay,
that's also where you can find the downloadable workbook. So if you want to
cool.
download the workbook resource that goes with the book, so like as you go over the four balance blockers, there's actually a worksheet. And so as you're reading that chapter, if you recognize like, oh, I suffer from this particular blocker, you can write it down. And then as we get into purpose, we start setting some goals to overcome that ambiguity and that, incongruence. You can go back and look at, okay, what's been blocking me? What are some goals I can set? You can
Mm-hmm.
set goals in each of those areas. We've got assessments we have our life balance assessment to start you off. There's a stress assessment in there. There's a
Cool.
cognitive flexibility. There's all kinds of great resources that go with the book. So I would
Got
recommend
it.
burdentobalancedbook.com to find all those resources.
That's fantastic, Megan. And how do people get in touch with you? Same website or different? Where do you want people to go to get in touch with you to learn a little bit more? Because number one, you're an amazing coach. And number two, you're also an amazing speaker. So I know that there are needs out there that when people need somebody to speak on these topics, you're someone that can be a great resource.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, I believe, a contact us section on that burdentobalancebook.com because we do have a workshop that accompanies the book.
Okay,
So we're
great.
happy to come in and do that workshop with your organization.
Nice.
You can reach out to me also through my email, Megan@lifeforcewellness.com, and follow me on social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn and
Yeah.
Facebook. So if you follow my social media there, you'll be able to connect with me.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I'm excited to see this book in the world. I knew it's been in the works for a little while, and I'm so glad that you put it out there. Megan, thank you for all the work that you do to help individuals, to help leaders to be everything that they can be. Both from a scientific and a spiritual perspective. I think this book is very much needed in today's world. So thank you. And thanks for being here again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on a second time.
Absolutely.